Robert Saleh has finally changed his tune. Robert Saleh is finally back down. Now, look, it's not as clear as that. It's not that Robert Saleh came out and said Zach Wilson is no longer our quarterback. It is not like Robert Saleh came out and said Zach Wilson stinks and he'll never be our starting quarterback. It never was going to be that with a head coach like Robert Saleh. And I agree with that. He's not going to throw his players under the bus when they fail. He's not going to say they failed in there. He's going to say they need to be better. They need to improve. This is what they're lacking. I understand all of that. What I finally saw from Saleh in this morning's press conference was an admission, or not even an admission, a change. Robert Saleh said, you have to read between the lines. It's very subtle. If you listen to his language up until maybe a little bit more recently, and I missed it, but if you look at the first year and earlier this year, Robert Saleh always took the stance of Zach Wilson is our starter. He always took that stance, right? Then it switched and he benched him and said he needs a reset. But you haven't seen the last of him. It's not over. He's our future. He's our starter. But this morning was different because this morning, Saleh didn't say Zach is our QB1. This morning, Robert Saleh said, we're not going to give up on any player still wearing a New York Jet uniform. And then he said, we will play the best player to play for the team. That's not what he did the first year and a half, people. The first year and a half, it was Zach Wilson is our starter. If he's healthy, he plays. Now, setting up not just the rest of this year, this was a message for next year and moving forward. Robert Saleh has finally said, it's over. He no longer gets to be the starter because he's the number 2 pick. He no longer gets to be the starter because we're developing our future quarterback. That is no longer what's going on. What's going on now is Zach Wilson is just another guy on the roster competing and having to prove he's good enough to be on the field. So now when we go into these final games, you're not going to see them pushing Zach Wilson into the game to try to force it, to hope he shows improvement. Next year in the offseason, when they come back to camp, you're not going to see them going in there with the attitude that Zach Wilson's going to be the starter like they have the last 2 seasons. The job's going to be up for grabs. Zach Wilson is a guy that they're not going to give up on. They're going to coach the hell out of him. They're going to do everything they can to help him find success. But you know what they're not going to do? They're not going to give him the starting job because of his name, his draft pick, none of that. It is now going to go to the best player. That is significant because Zach Wilson is by far the worst player on our roster, and that includes practice squad player Streveler. There, I said it. I was wrong as wrong could be about that kid. I said, are you on drugs? There's no way they're putting that kid in. But I didn't see the scenario. And the scenario that I didn't see was Zach Wilson being that bad, Mike White being hurt, and they obviously giving up on Joe Flacco and the belief that he can do anything. To the point with the playoffs on the line, they were willing to go with Streveler. Now we were on the ropes and dead. So to me, I said do it at halftime. For those of you who think I was so against Streveler, go back and watch on Green Bean Jet Fan. I said it at halftime. Put Streveler in there. Put Flacco in there. Put anybody in there. But anyway, also, I want to make it very, very clear that my view is not, and I am not, putting this loss yesterday all on Zach Wilson. The entire team, Mike LaFleur, Ulbrich, Salah, who's responsible for it all, offensive line. I know they're beat up and they're down tackles, but what's George Fant's excuse? What's Laken Tomlinson's excuse for his average play when we're paying him millions and millions of dollars? What's the excuse? I'm tired of hearing it's because of the guys that he plays around him. That is nonsense. He's a leader, or we're paying him to be a leader, and he's not. And the defense, while they didn't crack like last year, while they didn't give up tons of touchdowns, and they did keep us in that football game up until the fourth quarter, there was hope. They still didn't play well. They couldn't get off the field on third down. They were, they just allowed Jacksonville to eat up too many minutes. So they weren't good enough. Now, I will say they weren't what they were last year. They weren't that bad. They weren't throw up bad. But we all know there's a lot of things to fix on that defense as well. The team was poorly led yesterday. Those players did not play for Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh is supposed to, as a head coach, get his players to play for him. We were under the belief that they always would. We thought this is what his strength was, his attribute. But yesterday, it did not happen. The New York Jets did not come out to play football. The New York Jets were not prepared, and they were not enthusiastic or hungry. They have lost all their confidence, and we need Robert Saleh to prove that he could be a leader that gives them that confidence. I mean, I don't want to say this, but maybe he needs Jeff Saturday. I know somebody out there who was claiming Jeff Saturday is all that you need. He could make people believe in themselves. Well, you know what? Maybe that person was right. Maybe we need Jeff Saturday. I mean, not as the full head coach, but maybe as an advisor to come in and pump up the guys, because we are lacking any kind of leadership on this team as far as the players coming out ready and prepared to play. And we see this week after week with the way we start football games. They're not prepared and they're not ready to play games. Now, look, the roster is too good for this. And Robert Saleh next year, I'm already on next year. When they come out next year, we can't have a 1-4 start. If we have a 1-4 start, now we got a coach on a hot seat. And that's the reality. He brought us here. I'm not taking anything away from Robert Saleh or his accomplishment. He gave us meaningful games in December. This is all true. But no head coach job is completely protected with steel. If we come out after a collapse like this, 1-4 next year, we now have a coach on the hot seat. Do we fire him? No, not saying that. I'm saying he's on the hot seat. That means that we would be watching and seeing how he finishes up that year. But we are that close to being in that stage again. And that's awful, but it's true. Sad, it's unfortunate. Hopefully we play for some respectability now, play for some pride. It'd be nice to finish 9-8. It would be lovely to beat Miami, at least hurt those guys, whether it equates to a playoff berth or not. Just to beat Miami is always a nice thing. So we still have something to root for. Let's hope Mike White gets healthy, because really he's the most competent quarterback on the roster. And while he might not be the long-time answer, he's the best we got right now. Hit the like button if you like the video. Even if you don't agree with me, you can still hit the like button. You can still subscribe to the channel by hitting my bald head. You could still watch another video and see if there's anything you agree with. But anyway, before that happens, go Jets.